Alrighty, we all here. Hello! Please welcome Aaron Powell.
If I could just say a few words, I'd be a better public speaker. Thank you for the one laugh up the back. Okay, so why are you listening to me? Well, the primary reason is we had to kill some time before the after party. Like they're not going to let us in till 6:30, so we need to work out what to do for a little bit of time. So you're stuck listening to me for as long as I feel like standing on stage. But realistically, one of the reasons that I'm here is I've actually spoke at the first DDD Melbourne. One of a few people that are still around today that have been involved with DDD Melbourne since it started. Because I've also spoken at every DDD Melbourne except for one. The 1 year that I missed was the year that my first son was born, and it happened to be the same weekend as DDD Melbourne, and I figured for the sake of my marriage, it was better to not submit a talk and to stay around to support my wife. Good life tip for everyone out there. I've also spoken at every DDD around Australia. I think I've done 15 DDD talks nationally, including this one. I'm also an organizer of DDD Sydney. Admittedly, you don't have to stay though. Like, feel free to leave. I will give the count of 5 if anyone wants to make a run for it. But if you do that, you're not going to get to find out whether you win any of the prizes, so it's probably worthwhile staying anyway. And realistically, your other option was your list of this guy. Yeah, nah. It's better listening to me. But as I said, I've been speaking at DDD since the first one back in 2010, and I reached out to the organisers because I wanted to share a bit of my journey as someone who's been a speaker at DDD and has had a long history with DDD, and I feel it's had a really big impact on the career that I've had. But I want to start with just a bit about myself getting into speaking. When I was growing up, I struggled a lot with my reading and writing. When I started high school, I think it was in year 7 or 8, I got assessed and I had the reading skill of a 4th grader. I did a lot of after hours work, I did a lot of tutoring, and I'm hoping this year to get to a 5th grade reading level. My wife didn't actually realize how bad my reading skills were until one night she asked me to read something from a paper I was working on, and it took me about half an hour to get through one page. And it wasn't a long page, it wasn't like 8-point font or anything like that, but she stopped me then and went, wow, I didn't realize that it was such a challenge for you. I actually hated reading in public because I would miss words or I would add extra words. I would read sentences that just don't exist. So getting up and speaking was something that was a really massive no for me because I just really didn't want to do it because I was so self-conscious. I was so shy because I just knew how bad that I would sound coming across to an audience. So, 2010, when the first DDD was happening, I want to set your mind back to what it was like in 2010. We're just starting our teenage years and we're having a teenage dream because maybe there were about to be some fireworks. There was some new, thank you for the groan, Lars. He knew it was coming as well. In the technology industry, it was actually a really exciting time. Apple launched the first iPad and here it is showing the DDD 2010 website. Isn't it amazing? Look how far we've come. We've dropped the Gmail. Funnily enough, this is actually the only entry in the Wayback Machine for DDD 2010. It was all I could find, but this was the start of the tablet computing revolution. And while tablets had existed, Apple was really launching that out into the world. From a gaming standpoint, we were expecting to be able to shed ourselves from physical controllers for interacting with games because Microsoft had announced the Kinect. It was not long after that we had the PlayStation lollipop ice cream cone thing. I'm actually not sure what it's called. But Microsoft had announced the Kinect the year before as a Microsoft research project. It was the first time it became consumer grade in 2010. And I played a lot of Dance Dance Central at home, unashamedly. And here is the beauty that was me in 2010. Don't I look amazing? Nothing's changed. But back in 2010, I had actually recently moved to Sydney. I had never spoken at a conference. In fact, I'd actually only ever attended one single IT conference, or any conference in general, and that was in Denmark. I actually got invited to attend a conference in Denmark, and that was in 2009. But I'd never actually spoken at one. I didn't know, like, that was just not a thing that I was comfortable doing. I didn't even attend user groups because like this notion of being out in public and potentially having to speak to people, the reason I got into IT and into software engineering was so I didn't have to speak to people. And I think that a lot of people probably felt that when they started their career. It's like, yes, I can deal with computers, not people, or people through computers. I don't actually have to engage one-on-one with people. And that's exactly where I was, and that was one of my main reasons of getting into IT. But I was trying to meet some people, or at least expand the friendship outside of the small digital agency I was working for in Sydney. So I grew up in Melbourne and had moved to Sydney in 2009. And I started following a bunch of people on Twitter, because Twitter was really starting to take off back then. I was following people like Tatham Oddie, Alex Mackey, Steve Godbold, a bunch of people that I now call good friends, but I had never met them. And a lot of them were talking about this new conference that was coming up called DDD Melbourne. But I knew of conferences, being in the Microsoft space, I knew of conferences like TechEd on the Gold Coast, where there was thousands of people, there was these huge name speakers, those people that I mentioned before, they were the kinds of people that were speaking at these events. But DDD was different. It was marketed different. It was an event for a community. It was an event that anyone could submit to. And what that made me realize is that this was something that was attainable to me as a developer at a small digital agency. I could afford to go to an event. I think the first DDD was actually free. Maybe I can be corrected if that's not right, but it was a really minimal charge if it wasn't free. And as someone that didn't have a lot of money, that wasn't going to have a company sponsor me to go, it seemed like I could actually attend this conference. And the thing that was really different about it compared to the conferences that I was aware of, your tech heads of the world, was that they had this open call for papers. Anyone could submit a talk and potentially be a speaker at DDD. You didn't have to be these big names in the technology industry. So on a quiet Friday evening, I had a few drinks with my colleagues and we discussed the finer points of the world. And I was catching the bus home to where I live and went, you know what? How hard can it be to give a conference talk? I mean, these people I was talking to on social media, they seemed normal. Alex, okay, maybe not. But they seemed like normal people and they were doing public speaking. So yeah, how hard could it be? So I did a thing. I submitted a talk around something that I was very aware of, a bit of technology that I spent a lot of time with, which is an open source content management system. I was working on the open source project back in the day. This was the company that had actually invited me to their conference over in Denmark. And I got an email saying, congratulations, you're a speaker at DDD Melbourne. Okay. Don't panic. You've got no fear of public speaking as far as they're aware. Inside, I was really nervous because I'd never done anything above presenting to a couple of my colleagues. So we didn't do brown bags at any of the companies that I'd ever worked at. We didn't do in lunch and learns or whatever your company calls them. We didn't do internal hackathons. If I was speaking, it was because I was in a meeting with my peers and we were doing like a code review or something like that. I didn't go out and meet clients or anything. But now I had to actually stand in front of a bunch of people and talk about something that apparently I knew a lot about. But I don't remember a lot about giving that talk. Whether I've just blacked that out of my mind or I'm going to blame the fact that was 10 years ago and I'm a whole lot older now and a lot of beer has been consumed in that period. But I do know that I spent the entire time sitting behind a desk with a black set of slides with white text on them and doing some live demos, and I had way more content that I could ever have delivered in the time slot available. And I'm sure that if I was to watch a video of that, I would just feel really terrible because I think that compared to what I had imagined this talk was going to be on the day, it was nothing like that. But I delivered the talk and I felt exhilarated. It was amazing. People were coming up to me and asking me questions. They wanted to find out more. And it was all genuine conversations I was having off the back of this. And I realized that I wanted to do more of this. This was fun. This wasn't the thing that I had feared for all those years. Actually talking to people was fun. Who would have thought it? So I went back to Sydney and I decided that I wanted to start a new career. and or it changed the direction that my career was. I was at that, like prior to going to the first DDD Melbourne, I was quite content to sit behind a desk for 10, 12 hours a day and just write code. But now I wanted more. I wanted to be able to get involved in public speaking. I wanted to find more events that I could talk at and share the things that I was passionate about. So I started to look around for somewhere else that I could expand and do that with as an employer, because the company I was working at, it wasn't a main thing for them. I ended up joining Redify in the middle of 2010. The reason that I joined Redify is that a lot of the people that I was looking up to in the industry were Redify employees. They were doing the speaking that I wanted to do, so I wanted to be like them. And Redify was a company that was really encouraging of someone going out and doing public speaking. And that's something that I've continued to look for in an employer, because I love public speaking and I want my employer to be passionate for my passion, not just I'm another body in their large machine. I'm someone that can contribute and do the things that I love to do. And I started honing the craft of what I wanted to become as a public speaker. I started attending user groups, just getting out in the community and finding out what was happening there and what I could learn from those other people. I started to approach the people that I was looking up to as speakers and find out what had they done in their career that got them to the point that they were at, because I wanted to emulate that, or at least understand what I could do to try and achieve some of the successes that I saw that they were achieving. I kept an eye out for other events that I might be able to attend or potentially speak at, and I worked through the connections that I was making by attending user groups and community events to get introduced to conference organizers. And in 2011, I got invited to 3 large events, 2 in Australia and 1 in New Zealand. And that was super exciting, because I was just this unknown developer that had written a little bit of code for digital agencies up until that point. And now I'm getting invited to speak at large conferences internationally. I also looked at how could I branch out the kind of content that I was delivering. I wanted to make sure that the content and the messages that I could bring to an audience was something that was going to be relevant to them and to the industry that we were in at that point in time. I didn't want to keep rehashing the same talk over and over and over again for years on end. I wanted to bring something that was continually relevant. We're going to jump forward to 2014, which is, I think it's this lanyard here. I actually have all of the DDD lanyards still with me, and I also have all of the shirts that I've received over the year, because they're treasured possessions to me. Like, they represent this career journey that I've taken. But in 2014, Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer announced that he was going to be retiring. And as someone from the DDD community, and I'm not sure how many people know this, DDD was founded based off of the classic Steve Ballmer, developers, 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 from a conference. So the fact that Steve Ballmer was stepping down in 2014 that's a big moment for me as someone in the DDD community. And Satya Nadella was appointed the new CEO of Microsoft. And I don't think anyone would deny that the changes that Microsoft has taken over the last 5 years have been radical as a result of that, and actually reflects a lot of what we see in the industry at large, in the way that Microsoft has changed to make sure that they are still a relevant company. But it wasn't just Microsoft in the big enterprise space or the big company space that was making changes. Apple announced Swift as a new programming language for doing iOS and Mac applications. They didn't open source it in 2014. They open sourced it a little bit later on, but the first ability to do Swift as a programming language for iOS devices was then. It was also when the first of the really super jazzy logoed security vulnerabilities came out. This was Heartbleed that came out, or that was disclosed in 2014. And the fact that there was a big security disclosure in 2014 was really poignant, because some guy gave a workshop for the first time at DDD Melbourne 2014. If you're not familiar with who this is Troy Hunt. He runs a fairly successful website called Have I Been Pwned? You might have heard of that one. He also runs a Hack Yourself First workshop. And the first time he gave that workshop was DDD Melbourne 2014. So I think the DDD team can lay claim to the successes that Troy has had on the back of the fact that he was at DDD Melbourne. Exactly, yeah. But it was time to shake off the history of what DDD had always been. DDD was always a Microsoft-centric conference. There was a lot of .NET content, or at least Microsoft-heavy content, whether it was .NET or other flavors of things related to .NET programming. because it wasn't all about Microsoft now. And it wasn't all about the technology. In fact, in 2014 was the first time we started seeing some non-technology talks creeping into the DDD agenda. I gave my first non-technical talk at DDD, and that was a big shift for me because I was always a technologist. I always loved doing technical talks, live coding talks and stuff like that. But giving a non-technical talk to a technical audience is a great way to really stretch yourself and challenge the way that you engage with an audience, because the audience that you're presenting to is likely to be broader than what you're normally going to present to. If I'm giving a talk about C# programming, the audience is most likely going to be C# developers or people that are already ready to do C# development. They're less likely to be someone who is a Ruby developer or someone that is writing JavaScript on the server. But when you're giving a non-technical talk, your aim is to not just target a specific technology segment of the audience, you're trying to target an entire audience. I also found that giving a technical talk, you've got to be a lot more personal about it. This talk, I have touched on a few things of my history, and I'll continue touching on that, because if it's just a non-technical talk, but it's nothing about you, then where is that history coming from? Where is that message, and what is your authority to talk on that message? Like Pharrell, I was really happy in 2014 because it was the 5th year of DDD Melbourne, and the organizing team were kindly enough gave me this tote bag, a laptop bag, which was because I'd actually spoken at all 5 DDDs at that point, as had Bill. So Bill and I both received these bags, and I'm not quite sure what they were implying with the message that they put on there. But it was a great gesture. I have that still with me today. Don't tell them this, but I have actually used it predominantly as a nappy bag. I had to take out the disposable nappies in it before I flew down to Melbourne for the event today, but we still use it. Yeah! There's only so many laptop bags someone needs. Okay, so I'll jump forward again in time to 2016. 2016 was the year that I came back to DDD Melbourne. I took 2015 off because that was the year my older son Ruben was born. And as I said, it was a better idea for me to stay in Sydney for his birth than it was to come down to Melbourne and speak or attend DDD Melbourne. But I also changed my engagement with DDD. I started becoming an organizer of DDD Sydney. I joined Raf Haddad, who spoke earlier today, and Steve Godbold, there's Raf over there, front row. He gave a talk about time in the junior developer track today. And Steve Godbold, another colleague of ours, we started up DDD Sydney again after a number of years of hiatus. And this gave me a great insight into what it was like to run a conference. Definitely not at this scale. We're not trying to run an 800-person event. And in the first year, we were definitely not even close to running an 800-person event. But seeing behind the curtain of what it takes to organize a conference such as this was really eye-opening for me, because as a speaker, you kind of get a bunch of emails, you sign up for a ticket, you turn up, you give a talk, and you shake hands with the organizers and say, thanks very much. And you don't realize that it's that duck treading water analogy. Like, you don't see any problems, and I haven't seen anything go wrong today, but I can guarantee behind the scenes there have been people running laps of this conference venue, and I hope they've all had step counters on, because they've totally hit step goals for today, and they'll earn themselves a drink and to let their hair down at the end of this session. DDD itself was also evolving. DDD moved from being a kind of a 3-4 track conference, and they ran 6 tracks for the first time in 2016. 2016 also saw them move from the home that they'd had for the previous 5 years at Swinburne University to Monash University. They now had a larger venue, and were able to go there. And we're seeing a lot less .NET content. So inside of these workshops, though, I gave my first workshop there, and as someone who's delivering content, workshops are fundamentally different, because you can't just give a standard kind of talk. You've got to make sure that the kind of presenting that you're doing has adequate breaks for people to follow along or to ask questions. It's supposed to be interactive. It's not a workshop if you stand there and talk to people with laptops for an hour. That's just a normal conference presentation. You need to make sure that whatever you're doing, people can follow along and be engaged and interact with it. You need to be able to troubleshoot on the fly if you're doing a workshop. If someone has a different version of Node to the one that you're working with, well, how are you going to get them up to the right version, or work through problems that they might have in version mismatch? And doing this workshop got me an invite to the first NDC in Sydney to deliver that same workshop, which was really exciting for me because this was a large international conference brand that had sought me out to invite me as a workshop facilitator. We'll jump to the year of peaks, which is 2017. 2017 was the year that you were spending Christmas explaining what Bitcoin was to your extended family, and you're going, no, you've clicked buy. Oh, Bitcoin peaked at $19,000 US in 2017. It was also the year where blockchain became that thing that every CTO was going, we need a blockchain. Like, what for? Because it's a blockchain. And you're like, okay, fine, we'll do a blockchain. DDD actually had its first blockchain talk in 2017 as well, so it was the year of blockchain and Bitcoin. It was also the first year that junior developer, the junior dev.io team came on board to run a junior dev track. They ran a couple of sessions as the 7th track of DDD Melbourne that year. I gave a live coding talk that year. I'd done live coding before, but this time I tried to work out how could I deliver 13 live coding examples in 45 minutes. My answer to that was you want to try and script absolutely everything you can. I use Git tags or Git branches, so you just kind of jump forward in time, because when you're giving a live code talk, people aren't there to watch you type. People are there to learn the code. So the faster you can get the code on screen for people to read, and you can talk about what the code is, the better it is for them. And again, when you're doing a live coding talk, you need to prepare for failure. And once you're prepared for failure, prepare for some failures you haven't prepared for yet, because those ones are going to happen. And even then, you're still going to have failures happen. Be prepared to move on when doing a live coding talk as well, because people aren't wanting to watch you try and debug a problem after 15 minutes of, I know why this should work. I'll get there eventually. People aren't there to see that. They're there to see the story that you're telling them. Because at the end of the day, the audience isn't your enemy, I don't think. Hearing a lot of silence. Okay. Ouch. They're on your side. They want you to succeed, and they don't need you to make sure every demo works, because they know you're human just like them. And that brings us to 2019 and the final badge that I have here. This is the biggest DDD Melbourne that we've had so far. What was it, 835 tickets, I think it was, were issued for DDD Melbourne. There was 5 tracks, 44 speakers, was it? Or I'm reading numbers from other slides. But if we think back and kind of compare the content between 2011, we actually can't find the agenda for 2010. Promise that it happened, but we don't have any proof that it happened, except for a broken website. If we look at the content that we had there compared to this year, I count 13 talks in 2011 that I would call .NET or Microsoft heavy talks. We compare that to this year, and I would say there's really only one there, which is the ML.NET talk, which is a really .NET-centric talk. Other ones might have Microsoft stuff to them, but they weren't focusing on a Microsoft technology. We've seen inclusions of things like the junior developer track. We've seen changes in the speakers that we've got. We didn't have a whole lot of diversity in 2011, as you can probably see on that slide. Compare that to where we are today. I think I look about the same. A little bit of Photoshop on the left-hand side there. Same hair, slightly different hairstyle. But after my first DDD Melbourne, I decided that I wanted to pursue a employer that would support my public speaking desires, and it would be really supportive of that. I joined Redify in 2010. I worked there for 8.5 years and ended up in the sales team. So I had quite a varied career over the last decade. But then at the start of this year, I joined Microsoft. And what most people don't actually know is that I failed 3 interviews at Microsoft over the last decade. So I might seem like someone that knows what I'm talking about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I know everything. And that's the same about every speaker. Don't shake your head over there. I can see it. We as the speakers are still fallible humans. And like I said, I failed 3 times the interview process to Microsoft for 3 different roles. But now my job is to produce content. I spend all my day writing or preparing talks or that kind of stuff. And as someone that, like 10 years ago, who had a fear of public speaking, who struggled with writing because stringing a sentence together was a challenge, and now it's my job to write. Oh wait, you probably don't want to read my blog then. And I've gone back to my technology roots because I love technology and I want to maintain myself as a technologist. And DDD has evolved as well. DDD is no longer just a Microsoft or .NET-centric conference, and that's what I came across it as. It reflects the community as a whole. We had ML talks and design talks and data talks, but at the same time, we were still talking about a lot of things that we were talking about 10 years ago. We had talks about what is JavaScript frameworks and what you can learn from not using frameworks. 10 years ago, we were doing that with jQuery. We've always had testing talks at DDD. So while everything every year might seem new and there's always new and important technology for us to learn, the fundamentals are always there and they're always part of the community that you are in. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for the DDD organizers for 10 great years of DDD. Thank you for yourselves for coming out to show your support every year, except for this year where you didn't vote for me. That was really disappointing, but I still got in anyway.